What's going on, Dominators? Last but not least, I promised to also... Last but not least, I'm back with the heavy tank tutorial, also in English. The heavy tank is a specific unit you can unlock by reaching the industrial age and upgrading your factory to stage 3, I think. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's stage 3. From the global age on, you can build a second factory, so nice to know. If you have more factories at the high enough stage, then you can produce tanks or heavy tanks, multiple ones, so you don't have to have that much cost in case of training time. Like for all of our troops, the researches for our heavy tanks are getting done in the blacksmith, and you can unlock new researches if they're denied or the access is denied by upgrading your factory to the next level. If the factory upgrade also is denied, you might have to enter the next age. Another fact about donation as well as defense and offense. I received a lot of questions about when I get some donated tanks, which statistics will they have? So which boosts, which researches will they have, splash damage? And this is really easy to answer because it always only depends of the receiver. So if the receiver has done all of the researches, they are, no matter which one donated the units, they are done and are effecting all of your troops. If you, the receiver, haven't done, you won't get any of these effects. The other point is offense and defense. So pretty obvious, we have also heavy tanks in our defense, such which are coming or getting produced by our bunkers, as well as our resistance defenders, which are spawning by our destroyed factories. DomiNations is strictly separating offense and defense. So all offense researches you are doing, all statistic boosts, whatever, are not working for the defense and other way around. So there will be no splash damage for defense tanks, as well as no other statistics boosts. In some cases, if there is a donated tank, a heavy tank, inside a town center, these units may have splash damage. So let's get to the library. The heavy tank is quite an industrial troop. It is getting trained and it is also getting researched. Pretty obvious, therefore, with oil. It is a factory troop. All of our factory troops are about oil. And so because it's an industrial unit, a tank, in previous chapters and ages of the game, you only have some ponies and some horses, and from the industrial age on you will have tanks. The first chapter to research is at level 6, so the industrial level, actually the first of two of our industrial levels, we have level 6 as well as level 7 for industrial, and it is the heavy weaponry book. We have chapter 3 and chapter 4 for our heavy tanks. First, splash damage, pretty valuable, and I think you cannot, you should not underestimate. If you don't have the splash damage, attacking with heavy tanks makes much less sense. And we have chapter 4, reduces heavy tank MK2 or MK3, however how far you have got with your research, troop space by 1. The second chapter for our heavy tanks, and also the last one which we can research in the library, is quite the warfare book. It's in the global age, first stage or first level of the global age, so level 8. It's the warfare book, like already mentioned. And over here we have chapter 3 for our tanks. Heavy tank MK2 attacks 15% fast. The last consequence, our attack or our damage per second, or the damage of our heavy tanks and of all other troops, is just a product by the attack speed, so by the cadence or by the frequency, and by the initial attack strength. So it's getting multiplied up, and whether you are shooting 15% faster or dealing 15% more damage with every shot is in total not making any difference. It's only making a difference if you are going very in detail and looking for the attack of a specific unit against another unit or against a building. But in total we are over here only talking about a 15% increase of the heavy tank attack. In the library currently we only have 2 chapters at level 5 of Leonardo da Vinci for our heavy tanks, and they are only unlockable in the global age. So it's stage 5 of our university. You have you can't reach without the global age, I'm pretty sure. And over here, like for most of our other troops, we get the offense and the defense, so the damage and the hit points chapter, both are getting done 10 times 3%, so in total we can get 30% additional hit points, as well as 30% additional damage for our tanks. Here we have another chart I have only made for this video tutorial, so for all of you guys. And this time I have even done more effort to all of this, so you can see these pretty little tiny pictures on top over here, and we can also see the percentual increases by every age of the hit points and of our damage per second, training costs, as well as other statistics I have laid out, because in my opinion they are not primarily important. All values which you are seeing over here are unboosted, so these are quite the same values like you can find at DomiNations Wikiar, for example. If you have done some additional researches, if you have some other world wonders, some specific nations, for example, it could be that the values are slightly changed, and in most cases they will be pretty much higher than you find in this chart. But as I mentioned, all of these values are unboosted, so you can be sure that they only can go above and further and not can't be below. First off, I have done some mistake over here. So the mistake is quite about I thought MK3 as well as MK4 would be global age stage. In fact, we have 2 stages for industrial, 1 for the global age and 2 again for the atomic age. So a global should be over here at MK3 and atomic should be at both of this, so MK4 as well as MK5. But nevertheless, I think this won't be that severe that you can't watch the video anymore. Let's go to the hit points itself. When you have built the factory in the industrial age and finally got access to your heavy tanks, you get the basic stage with 20,000 hit points and 1,000 damage per second. If you are upgrading the first time in your blacksmith, you get 0% additional hit points, which is slightly desperating or depressing, or I don't know, it's bad. And but you get 10% more DPS. In total, that's not a big jump, but nevertheless better than nothing. But then if you are upgrading from the industrial to the global age, you get the biggest increase of all ones. So you get 26.5%. In total, you can call it one quarter, I think, 1/4. More hit points, which is severely a really big amount, and you get additional 10% more damage. Then from the global age up to the atomic age, again, the description over here is wrong. Global age, atomic ones, you get 15% increase, which is still a lot of hit points, and 14.9, so summed up about 15% again more damage per second. And totally in the final upgrade to the currently last stage, Mark 5 or MK5, you get 10.3%, so 10% more hit points, and you get 5.5% more damage per second. Now let's come to some positive as well as negative aspects, so pros and cons about our heavy tanks. First, they have an insane amount of hit points. If we are remembering our heavy tank statistic value chart before, and you are seeing my hit points, they are severely above the value which you could see in the unboosted statistics. Another very positive aspect are the damage per second, because if you have already researched the splash damage, the one shot of our heavy tank will not have the same range, but far more damage than all of our howitzer or field howitzer shots could even have. Additional, we have some bonus damage against strong enemy defenders such as cavalry, generals and heavy tanks. So all kind of defenders which can be a pain in the ass in case of attacking. The range is quite moderate, it's about 3 like all other tanks also have. Also, heavy tanks are unable to shoot above walls, so they have to eat through the walls. The training costs are relatively or fairly high, with 910 oil per tank. Time are 40 minutes, so in total we will have a quite long time to train all of these tanks. In case of attacking, which or like we will see later in some video footage, heavy tanks have nearly to care about nothing. You have not to care about fort. You don't have to care about any enemy town center defenders, mostly not about enemy defenders such as infantries at total not, at tanks mostly not. Only some enemy heavy tanks can deal severe damage to your troops, or even resistance spawning heavy tanks. The onlyest very pain in the ass for your heavy tanks, which is pretty obvious because otherwise they would have nearly no weaknesses, are anti-tank guns. And anti-tank guns, especially if they are behind walls, can easily smash your heavy tanks. Therefore, later on we will go through some tactics which you may add to your army to support your heavy tank composition. About the army composition down here in the scroll bar, most players consider or are using heavy tanks in a heavy tank only attack. So they are building as many heavy tanks as possible and filling or supplying the rest of their troops up with some helpful and troops which are individualized to the current situation. So if the enemy has high walls and they really maze layout, they are, for example, using some wall miners. Otherwise they are filling up their troops with some additional howitzers, with some shooters, whatever you need in the specific situation. And I think you should quite adapt this to your individual and current enemy, and there can't be done any general advices. Another pretty valuable approach is, I think, if you have a complete army out of heavy tanks, you could let one of these heavy tanks away to get 24 more troop space and take, for example, a few more howitzers with yourself, some engineers if the enemy has bunched up all of his resource building, some raiders, for example. But in total, I am not a friend of having only 1 or 2 heavy tanks with yourself. It is the most obvious or the most often played tactic after the nerf of our main tactics such as protect, sabotage and betrayal. But now when you are attacking with heavy tanks, there may come the situation that especially cannon towers are very effective against your decoys. So decoys may not be the best choice. First aid is not that interesting for your ordinary troop composition, but if you are attacking with some troops with high hit points, you can see keeps your troops alive, especially generals and cavalry. This means first aid is healing a defined percentage of the health or of the hit points of your troops, and if you have troops with high hit points with yourself, because it's percentual healing, there will be a pretty much bigger amount of hit points getting healed than with lower troops. So I can only really recommend to you, upgrade first aid if you plan to attack with heavy tanks and try to use it. Also another player which I know for a long time and which seems to also have done some heavy tank attacks, so gained some experience. He recommended to me using the first aid, because if you are deploying the first aid and all tanks or all units you are hitting with it will getting healed, no matter whether they are still inside the range of the first aid or not. So if they are in the first range when you are deploying the first aid, they will getting healed for the complete time, so for the duration of 10 seconds or even higher if you have upgraded it. I have not done. Sabotage, protect and betrayal, like we told, are still some valuable and very useful tactics if you want to use them, but they are costing 2 troop space. So, which is really interesting is demolition, because in fact or in opposition to the mortars, cannon towers have definitely lower hit points. So my cannon towers now have 3,438 hit points. They are global age maxed, as well as boosted by some defense blessings. The damage of my demolition is about 2,600. So if you are combining the demolition damage with University and, for example, Mongols Coalition, you can get approximately 45% more damage, so nearly 50%. We will end up at 3,800, 3,700 approximately, so you will have enough damage to kill a complete cannon tower with only 1 demolition. Even if you if you are unable, you can use your planes to get then, after using the demolition, rid of the cannon towers. Betrayal, nevertheless, of the troop 2 tactics space capacity is pretty valuable then if the enemy has quite high level bunkers. If the enemy has high level bunkers, the enemy heavy tank defenders will also be high level, will be a severe threat for your attacking army, and also the enemy resistance troops will be that adequate level of the highest bunker. Therefore, using Betrayal at some resistance tanks or at some spawn tanks may save your ass in a very hard attack. In case of generals, to fulfill or to fill your army up, nearly all generals are pretty valuable. If you're thinking about heavy tanks having not that huge range, I think Napoleon should be. If we are coming to nation choice, there are only 2 nations which should be really coming into consideration to use for heavy tanks attacks. First, the Germans, because obviously the Germans have the Teutonic Fury, which gives a boost damage to all of our troops. But which could be pretty much more interesting for you are the Romans. The Romans have an increased army size by about 10%, so the higher you get in the ages, the more the 10% in total will mean in troop space. Ways of World Wonders, we only have 2 choices in my opinion to choose. First one, Versailles, which gives all of our troops, no matter whether defense or offense, 10% additional troop health if you have done the Library chapter of Heritage. You will get, instead of 11% more HP. If you are thinking about the ordinary massive HP of our tanks of 20,000 or probably 30,000 plus, you will see 10% more HP are severely a huge amount, especially at our heavy tanks. Also, you should definitely not miss to choose in the Industrial Age the Brandenburg Gate, because over here you get 20% more troop damage of our factory troops or of your factory troops. Again, if you have done the heritage research, you will get 22% more damage. Let's come to the video footage. Only for a little side notice, I don't think that this conducted attack is very good, but nevertheless this content will be only some kind of example. If you are attacking with heavy tanks, you can see, like this person over here, he's using only heavy tanks and the rest troop space which is remaining, filling up with some howitzers to get some ranged and also some damage above the walls. In the bottom corner you can see that the heavy tanks are pretty getting smashed by a cannon tower, but nevertheless Blitzkrieg is getting used pretty senseful, and the player don't has to make any issues about the missile silo, which is one of the strongest building currently. Also the healing tactic is getting used, and you see that the heavy tanks are even more profiting from the healing tactic than other troops due to their high hit points. I would not use heavy tanks in a bunched up attack, so I would spread them out, also like this player did, using for example also tank destroyers from the mercenary camp and some generals. It's definitely recommendable to use your heavy tanks spread out and go for the 50% victory without any rallying if possible, instead of bunching them up. This attack is a perfect example, therefore, that only cannon towers are really threat to heavy tanks. Therefore, the player early on carries about the cannon towers with the planes and then deploys the heavy tanks. At this base, the heavy tanks are getting deployed right around the base. In my opinion, this is not the best opportunity or the best method, because if you are attacking from all flanks, you will also attract as many defenders as possible. And this is quite not senseful. I would approach from one, probably from 2 flanks, but not more. You see also heavy tanks MK5 as well as MK4. This means that he has overtaken some heavy tanks with Betrayal, so obviously he is playing with Betrayal tactic. Now already the 50% have been done after a very short amount of time, and he only has to care about getting the whole rest of the base. You see some howitzers down there, probably from the Alliance Gate, so some troops to deal damage even above walls. During the tanks are doing the main attraction or attention work for all of the other defense buildings as well as defenders, and the howitzers can easily run afterwards and do some damage over the range. Here you see some Roman player using the obvious advantage of increased troop capacity, but nevertheless 4 wall miners and all of the rest troop spaces filled up with howitzers again to do some damage. The complete attack runs over 1 flank, so in my opinion this is a very good attack. In total, some event troops have to be used against this strong enemy base with also some defense coalitions and maxed out walls. So enjoy the rest of the video footage. Hopefully this guide or tutorial video was informative as well as entertaining for you. Some honest feedback I would really appreciate. Otherwise, see you soon, Dominators. Your domination tips.